So I had you guys do a poll on which cookie you wanted to see next, and you guys chose Rockstar. Well, ain't this awkward? Welcome everyone, and today I have a Rockstar guide planned for you. Now, I forgot to check the poll for a while and didn't realize Crush Pepper was actually winning, but in my defense, I didn't expect him to start winning because the last time I checked, there was a pretty big gap between Rockstar and Crush. So, yeah, he'll be coming a day after, hopefully. Sorry about that. As always, timestamps are down below, so you can skip to whatever part of the video you want to. Let's get into it. Here is Rockstar's guide card on screen, and like always, thank you to the Tower of Build's Discord server for providing it. They will be linked down below like always. I'll give you another good look, and let's go. No matter what way you put it, Rockstar's best artifact is going to be his signature Encore performance. The first thing that makes this artifact good is the fact that it gives attack, which is what Rockstar happens to scale off of, with both his damage and his healing. So the more attack you have, the more powerful your Rockstar will be. Kind of, we'll get into that later. But the other reason is the unique ability, which is the theme song buff. Whenever Rockstar switches in, or in other cases, just the equipped cookie, a theme song buff will play. You can read them above, but the heavy metal buff increases his attack, which increases both his damage and his healing output. Punk increases his movement speed, which is honestly the weakest of them as it doesn't really give any value. Jazz flat out increases his healing, which is nice. And then Folk increases his buff amplification. Heavy metal, Jazz, and Folk are actually all really good on Rockstar, as they all give him something that he wants. Meaning, even though it's technically luck, you have a 75% chance of getting a massive increase. And even if you end up getting Punk, it's still not the end of the world, as the other buffs are incredibly good, so it kind of offsets that. Especially the Folk buff, as the buff amplification increases the amount of attack that Rockstar gives during his ultimate, which is obviously very good. So yeah, overall, this is his best artifact, as it essentially just gives free stats. Now, his second best artifact is going to be Chamomile Signature, Afternoon Tea. Now, while the stat that this artifact gives is HP, the unique ability actually makes up for it. The unique ability increases your healing done by 15%, and it makes it so that way whenever the cookie heals an ally, they get the Calming Cup effect. Since the Calming Cup effect can only be granted if you heal an ally, it turns the damage healed in order to grant the Calming Cup effect into damage that your ally does. So essentially it turns your damage healed to your allies into bonus damage for them, which is actually really good, considering if you're healing a ton, you'll be giving your allies a ton of extra damage. So yeah, overall the unique ability actually kind of does make up for the fact it gives HP, considering it does increase the amount of healing you do, and it grants you that extra damage, all while there is no RNG involved. Now the first one is going to be Ninja's artifact, Path of Training. This makes it so that way whenever the cookie's ultimate hits 5 times, nearby allies are granted 12% attack for 10 seconds. While this does sound good on paper, the prerequisite makes it only good for raids really. As for just normal gameplay, this isn't very convenient. But it does give an attack boost to Rockstar, which is pretty nice, considering he needs it to do damage and heal. So yeah, this is a pretty solid option, but it's going to perform best in raids. The second one is going to be Angel's Divine Halo. Divine Halo is really simple. You get attack, you get reduced crit rate, but your healing is increased by 15%. So while this is not bad, it reduces your crit rate, which means you cannot crit with Rockstar unless you build a ton of crit rate, which you should not be doing, by the way. The attack is nice, the healing is nice, it's very simple. You probably don't want to run this in raids though, so yeah. If you really want to build healing Rockstar, this is your way to go if you do not have either of the epic artifacts. And the final rant artifact is going to be Alchemist's Newest Formula. Newest Formula is the one I would recommend the least, but it's still something to consider. First of all, it grants attack, which is always nice, but its unique ability is what we want to look at. It makes it that way the cookie's ultimate has a chance to reduce enemies' elemental resistance to a specific element. While this sounds good on paper, it's not always guaranteed to hit. And again, it's tied to the ultimate. For Rockstar Cookie at least, it's essentially a budget version of Path of Training. So if you somehow don't have Path of Training and you want to run a raid build, this would be your best bet. But that's all from the artifacts, so let's move on to the equipment. So Rockstar's best weapon is going to be the Rock and Roll Candy Guitar. This is because it's a signature, no duh. But its unique ability actually gives him 16% buff amp, which is crazy. Considering it's the only buff amp giving weapon, this is something you really want on him. But the super epics is where it gets tricky, as he technically only has one viable set, that being the Ghost Captain's Garb. This is because its unique ability allows Rockstar to reduce enemies' defense, which is actually pretty crazy, making Rockstar both a buffer and a debuffer. Not to mention its bodywear actually gives attack, meaning hello, more damage and healing. But if you're seriously dead set on having a super epic set and you don't have a Ghost Captain set available, then Eminent Herbalist Apparel is your only other option. I would not recommend building this, by the way. Do not build this if you have a choice. But I know there is someone out there that wants this information, so here you go. What it does is it makes it so a 10% of overhealing increases allies' attack. The only issue is he does not heal enough. Not to mention the percentage for the set itself isn't incredible, but it's not the worst set in the world. But seriously, I'm not kidding when I say that epic equipment would be better. Speaking of epic equipment, before I cover all the miscellaneous epic pieces, I want to first cover the epic build. The epic build consists of the golden orange taco spear, the star of the party hat, the celestial candy cuirass, and the musician's trumpet pants. Now this is his attack slash buff amp build. This is actually what a lot of people in raids use. Kind of. The important parts of this build is the hat and the leg wear, because these are the only two items in the game that give buff amp. So while the weapon and the body wear aren't bad, if you have Rockstar's weapon and you have the Ghost Garb chest piece, you are better off going those. The other viable epic items include the mystical Aurora hood and the pearl adorned silver tiara for the headwear, the royal cacao coat for bodywear, and the Arum dragon armor for legwear. Now it's time to move on to the hidden powers. So for your elemental powers, for the weapon slash headwear, you want to prioritize water elemental attack and then attack, and for the bodywear slash legwear, you want to focus buff amp and then attack and then healing. The guide note at the bottom says prioritize buff amp to 40 to 50% and then water elemental attack or attack stats to boost healing and also damage. Healing is the last because Rockstar again doesn't heal all that much, but it's still a nice little addition. And finally, for Rockstar's teammates, he works with pretty much anyone as long as they scale with attack. On screen you can see my Rockstar and oh, he hasn't even hit 40k yet. Here's the other stats. But yeah, on to the review. So Rockstar is overall a really good cookie, as he's a mix between a damage dealer, a buffer, and a healer. But he does more buffing than he does damage or healing, as his damage is pretty mid. His damage isn't bad, but it's not something you should be focusing on per se. I do wonder when he'll be power cut though. But I do have a couple tips for you guys. The first tip is to make sure to pay attention to his passive stacks. Whenever he does a basic attack or a dash, he gets a music note. And whenever he gets max music notes, he gets the rock speed effect with the next ability used. With his special skill, it puts a healing circle around him, and with his ultimate, it does damage inside of it. So make sure you manage that, because if you use an ability without having the rock speed effect, it's so much weaker than with it. The extra damage on the ultimate is actually really helpful, as it can do just a little bit of chip damage to the boss or to surrounding enemies. And because it has a massive multiplier, the damage does kind of matter. The multiplier is 900% attack, which is kind of insane. There really isn't too many other tips considering he's a pretty simple cookie, and there isn't much mechanically to consider. Also, make sure whenever you use your ultimate, your allies are inside it so they get the attack buff. But yeah, that's all for the guide. The support cookies in this game are fairly simple, but I tried my best to provide an in-depth explanation for reasoning for things, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, a like and a subscribe would be very appreciated. Also, remember to join my Discord server and the Tower of Build server, both of which will be linked down below. But yeah, I have some extra gameplay for you guys, but have a good day.